Bill's a former United States attorney in New York, and now he is the coach of one of the top high school mock trial programs in the country, former world champion at Carmel High. So I think you're going to have a great round with Judge Schreier. Bill, have a great time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, I'll call the case of Ethel Marx versus Sonny's Rooftop Bar, and I will ask the plaintiff to enter an appearance.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Abby Branham, and I, alongside my co-counsel, Miss Emily Hinton, represent the plaintiff in this case, Miss Ethel Marx, on behalf of the estate of her daughter, Jessica Marx.
Good morning, Ms. Branham. Ms. Hinton, defense and appearance, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Seva, Castleberry, and today I'm joined by Mr. Jacob Hervey, my second chair.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Apologize for the echo. Mr. Hervey will be dealing with our tech today. And together, we represent the defendant, Sonny's Bar, represented today by Sonny Mehta.
Great. Good morning, Mr. Castleberry.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good morning. Yeah, we're going to have that issue, aren't we? It's morning here, it's afternoon there. Oh, well, I'm sure we'll get through that. Okay, any preliminary matters before we get started?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff has some brief preliminary matters if the court would hear those at this time.
Please.
First, we would just ask, due to the nature of this trial, that if at any point you're having trouble seeing or hearing us, that you just go ahead and interrupt and let us know about that.
It asks that you do the same for me too.
Yes, Your Honor. Next, I'd like to draw the court's attention to evidentiary ruling number 11 in this case, which pre-admits an exhibit, the autopsy report of Jessica Marx, exhibit number 22.
Okay, if that becomes pertinent, you'll call my attention to it, or do you intend to use it in opening and that's why you're telling me now?
We just wanted to put the court on notice of that stipulation, Your Honor, that that one exhibit has been pre-admitted prior to trial.
Okay, and that was exhibit 11?
That was exhibit number 22, the autopsy.
Number 22, got it. Okay.
Yes, Your Honor. Next, we'd like the court to take judicial notice of stipulation number 14. As Your Honor knows, one of the elements the plaintiff has to prove throughout the course of this trial was that on March 24th of 2019, the victim, Jessica Marx, was served alcohol under the age of 21. We would just like the court to take judicial notice of stipulation 14, Jessica's birthday, that it was January 20th of 2000.
Mr. Castleberry.
Yes, Your Honor, that's understanding of the stipulation.
So noted.
Next, Your Honor, we'd like to constructively invoke Rules 603 and 615, the constructive swearing in of all available witnesses and their sequestration.
Mr. Castleberry.
Yes, Your Honor, we agree.
Okay, so we do not have party representatives.
Your Honor, in this case, Sonny Mehta, the owner of the defendant bar, will be our party representative. Apologies.
Okay, so then that individual is not going to be sequestered, right?
Correct, Your Honor.
Yes,
Okay.
Your Honor, and the plaintiff does not have a party representative in today's trial.
Got it.
Finally, Your Honor, we would just like to ask your preferences for the displaying of exhibits for witness identification. Would you prefer in this online format that we ask permission prior to doing that, or that we state verbally what we're showing the witness for identification for the record?
Yeah, I'd ask that you just make a record of it. I don't want to get in your way. Okay, so whatever's required, just make a record.
Yes, Your Honor. And can we display those exhibits for identification with the knowledge that they're out of the jury's view prior to being entered into evidence?
Of course.
Yes, Your Honor. And with that, the plaintiff is ready to proceed to openings.
Mr. Castleberry.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Two quick things. First, Your Honor, since liability in this case is based on a unique statute, I'd like to draw your attention to the jury instructions made by the pretrial judge that lay out the issues in this case. Now, Your Honor, here it says that under California law, the current jurisdiction, to meet the plaintiff's burden for wrongful death, the claim being brought today, the plaintiff must show that Jessica Marx's death, the victim, was caused by the defendant bar's decision to give her alcohol. And Your Honor, that means that the bar is not liable if its decision to give her alcohol was only a remote or trivial factor in her death.
Okay. Ms.
Yes, Your
Branham?
Honor.
Ms. Branham, do you have anything to say about that?
No, Your Honor, that's our understanding of the pretrial order.
Okay. Now,
Thank you, Your Honor.
just want to check something out with you, Mr. Castleberry. You said under
Sure thing.
California law. Explain to me how California law would be relevant in a federal proceeding.
Yes, Your Honor. This case was originally brought in California because of a specific dram shop statute, a specific California statute which says that the defendant bar, which is located in California, says that a defendant bar is liable for any damages to a victim by serving alcohol to them if they're a minor. So, Your Honor, the defendant bar is located in California. This is what the plaintiff is alleging occurred.
I understand that. We're in federal court though, right?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay, so the substantive law of California would apply in a diversity action because that's where the cause of action occurred, right?
I believe in this case, Your Honor, the plaintiff is pursuing a claim of wrongful death based on the dram shop statute. I believe plaintiff could elaborate if they need to.
Okay, all right, well, let's move to openings then, okay? Unless there was anything else, Mr. Castleberry.
Apologies, Your Honor. One more quick thing. We'd like to
Okay.
note that we're bringing an affirmative defense for what's called contributory negligence. And now that means if the jury finds that the defendant bar has some liability here, then the jury needs to apportion liability based on the compared negligence of Jessica Marx and Sonny's bar.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm a little confused as to why you're bringing that to my attention right now.
Yes, Your Honor. We expect that this will become relevant later in trial. We just wanted to bring it to the court's attention such that any objections come up, we know what we're dealing with.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to say. If it does come up and there's some pertinence of this particular provision to whatever's being litigated at that point, remind me of it, okay?
Thank you, Your Honor. Understood.
Because I'm not going to keep all these things straight, I'm sure.
No
Okay,
worries.
it's
Thank
on
you,
you,
Your Honor.
on both of you to keep me on the straight and narrow, okay? Anything else,
Yes, Your
Mr. Castleberry?
No, Your Honor, that's it for the defense.
Very well. Ms. Branham, whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, counsel, members of the jury. Her life was cut short because they didn't cut her off. It's March 24th of 2019. A 19-year-old girl named Jessica Marx stumbles out of a Los Angeles bar, car keys in hand. Her eyes are bloodshot. Her speech is slurred. Her breath reeks of alcohol. She tries to open her car door to get in and drive away, but members of the jury, today you're going to learn she didn't make it home that night. Instead, just minutes after pulling out of that bar's parking lot, her car began to swerve. It swerved over the median in the road, off the side of the highway. The only thing that stopped it was the ditch where her body was later recovered, with a blood alcohol content of a 0.16, twice the legal limit. So how did we get here? Well, today you're going to learn that it was the actions of that Los Angeles bar, a place called Sonny's Rooftop Bar, that led to the death of Jessica Marx. You're going to learn that they continued to serve her alcohol knowing that she was underage and that she had had too much already. That's why we're here. That's why we've brought the civil claim of wrongful death against the defendant, Sonny's Rooftop Bar. Because of that, the law says that we bear a burden of proof in this case. It says we have to prove to you 3 separate things by the greater weight of the evidence here. The first, that the victim in this case, Jessica Marx, was under the age of 21 on March 24th of 2019 when she was served alcohol. Now you're going to learn today that the defense, prior to this trial, they already agree with us about this element. They agree that Jessica Marx was only 19 years old the day she died. Next, we'll prove that the defendant served her alcohol after she was obviously intoxicated. And third, we'll prove that it was the defendant's actions that were a substantial factor in her death, that the alcohol they served to her that night, that it caused her car to veer off the side of the highway. Her life was cut short because they refused to cut her off. To prove that to you today, we're going to call to the stand someone named Morgan Levin, Jessica Marx's best friend and somebody who was with her at that bar that night. Listen carefully as Mr. Levin testifies about not only how much alcohol Jessica Marx was served, but about how her physical condition progressed throughout the course of that night. You'll hear him talk about how her eyes became bloodshot, how her speech became slurred, how her breath began to smell of alcohol, but members of the jury, listen carefully when he details one event from that night, a moment when Jessica Marx stumbled and fell at that bar. You're going to learn today she didn't just stumble coming down the stairs, she stumbled into an employee of Sonny's bar. Listen carefully for what their response was. You'll hear that they said, maybe we should cut this one off. Listen carefully for the other employee's response. They just laughed. At the end of this trial, it'll be clear. The evidence will show that the reason Jessica Marx is no longer with us, the reason her car veered off the side of the highway, it was because of the defendant's actions. You'll learn that 19-year-old Jessica, her life was cut short because the defendant didn't care enough to cut her off. That's why at the end of this trial, we'll ask that you do the only thing that the law and justice will allow. We'll ask that you hold them responsible for what they allowed happen to 19-year-old Jessica. We'll ask that you find the defendant liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Branham. Mr. Castleberry.
Yes, Your Honor. Can you see and hear me okay?
I can.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. You can't prevent what you can't predict. Now, Ms. Branham just told you that Jessica Marx died in a car accident 2 years ago. That's true. They told you that Jessica was at Sonny's rooftop bar earlier that night. That's true too. But they also told you that Jessica died because the bar served her too much alcohol, that her life was cut short because they didn't cut her off. Members of the jury, that's not true. You see, today, you're not going to see any hard evidence that Jessica even drank that much when she was at Sonny's bar. No, instead, you're going to learn that Jessica got drunk before she even showed up, that she was intoxicated because of the alcohol she drank at home, not the alcohol they served at the bar. As tragic as it is, Jessica died because of the choices she made all on her own. Now let's get something out of the way. Sonny's bar unknowingly sold alcohol to a minor with a fake ID a few years ago. That's illegal. They were wrong to do it, and they were rightly punished for it when they lost their liquor license. Neither me nor Ms. Branham disputes that. But this case isn't about whether the bar sold alcohol to someone who was underage. It's about whether Jessica died because of the drinks the bar gave her. See, it's the plaintiff's burden to prove that it's more likely than not that Jessica died because of the alcohol she got at Sonny's bar, not alcohol she drank anywhere else. But they won't be able to meet that burden. And to help you understand why, I want you to keep 3 questions in mind. First, how much did Jessica actually drink at Sonny's? Second, how did Jessica really get drunk? And third, how much did Sonny's know about any of this? So first, how much did Jessica actually drink at Sonny's? You see, today, the plaintiff isn't going to bring you any hard evidence about how much Jessica actually drank at the bar. You'll learn that Jessica and her friend did order drinks, but the witnesses saw her friend drink most of them. But still, we all agree that she was drunk. So that brings us to our second question. How did Jessica Marx really get drunk? Well, you're going to learn that Jessica started drinking alcohol long before she went to Sonny's that night, that she might have finished an entire bottle of wine earlier that day, that before she even set foot in that bar, her breath already smelled like alcohol, she was already slurring her words, her eyes were already bloodshot. You see, you're going to learn that Jessica may have died because she got drunk on her own time. That brings us to the last question. How much did Sonny's know about any of this? Today, you'll learn that when the bar served Jessica a few drinks, they didn't know that she was already drunk. They didn't know that Jessica was only acting sober. They didn't know she chose to drink and drive. See, Jessica's death was caused by choices she made all on her own. Choices the bar's employees didn't know anything about. But members of the jury, make no mistake. What happened to Jessica was awful. And when something so sad, so unjust happens, it's natural to want to find someone, anyone to blame. But in a court of law, it isn't enough to just blame someone. It isn't enough to hold just anyone accountable. You have to hold the right person accountable. And this tragedy isn't about Sonny's bar. Because you can't prevent but you can't predict. That's why at the end of this trial, I'll come back up here and I'll ask you to find Sonny's bar not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castleberry. Ms. Branham, you may call your witness.
Yes, Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff calls Mr. Morgan Levin to the stand.
Mr. Levin, consider yourself sworn. Ms. Branham, you may proceed when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Please introduce yourself to us.
Hi, I'm Morgan Levin.
Morgan, how old are you?
I'm 21 years old, ma'am.
Are you in school?
Yes, I actually just finished up my junior year at UCLA last week, so.
Morgan, I want to go ahead and draw your attention to the reason we're in court today. Did you know Jessica Marx?
Yes, she was my best friend since junior high.
We need to talk about what happened on March 24th of 2019. Were you with Jessica that night?
Yeah, she was visiting me that week at UCLA for spring break, and we were together that night.
Did you two decide to go anywhere that night?
Yes, ma'am. We went to a bar in Eastern Malibu called Sunny's Rooftop Bar.
How did you get there?
Well, I don't have a car, I just live in the dorm, so Jessica drove us both.
Morgan, I want to be really upfront with the members of this jury. Were you and Jessica 21 years old when you went to that bar that day?
No, I know that was wrong. We were 19.
You said you were 19. Were you able to get into that bar?
I mean, yeah, we got in, no problem. Went straight up to the roof.
I want to walk through what happened once you got inside that bar. What time exactly did you arrive there?
We got there around 9 p.m. on the 24th.
Did you two order drinks at that bar?
Yes, I ordered some, Jessica ordered some, we both did.
Mr. Levin, would you recognize a photo of what your table looked like at around 9:45 that night?
I would think so, yes.
Let the record reflect we're displaying Exhibit 13 for witness identification.
Will so reflect.
Morgan, do you recognize this photo?
Yes, ma'am, I actually took it.
And is it a fair and accurate depiction of what your table looked like at 9:45 on March 24th?
It is.
At this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff seeks to enter Exhibit 13 into evidence.
Mr. Castleberry,
Without objection, Your Honor.
13 is received.
Morgan, of the beverages in this photo, what exactly did you drink?
So I'm the one taking the photo, and that's Jessica sitting across from me. The glass of wine in front of me, I had that. One of the beers I had as well. So a glass of wine and a beer.
And of the things in this photo, what, if anything, did you watch Jessica order that night?
I mean, on everything else. She had some of the wine with me. We shared that. She had some beer. The White Claw, you see, any of the White Claws were hers. I can't stand White Claw. But in that picture, that's pretty much it, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. Throughout the course of that night, Did Jessica ever appear to you, based on what you saw, to be intoxicated?
To me, yeah. I mean, she slurred her words. Her eyes were pretty red, I guess. She got loud, and I mean, it definitely at one point she actually kind of stumbled. She almost fall down, and that's when I was like, "Okay, kid, like we gotta, do something here."
Let's talk about that stumble. What time exactly did that happen?
The stumble was about maybe 10 at night.
And do you remember where you were when it happened?
Yeah, I mean, we were. So you have to know about Sonny's. There's the rooftop, the bar's downstairs. So we were coming down those stairs from the rooftop area down to the bar. We were going to use the restroom or something, and I was trying to, go with her. And halfway down the stairs, she just stumbled and just about fell over.
Was anybody else with you when Jessica fell?
I mean, the bartender was around, or Sonny, I guess. Sonny Meta was the one giving us drinks that night, and Sonny was right in front of her.
How, if at all, did that waiter respond to Jessica falling?
Well, Sonny was the one that kind of caught her, first of all. And I remember he looked over at the bartender standing down below and was like, "Hey, we might need to cut this one off, Frankfurt."
Did you see how the bartender responded?
Just laughed, didn't say anything.
Morgan, did the bar cut Jessica off at that point?
No, I mean, like I said, that was 10 p.m. They served us for another hour and 45 minutes.
Would you recognize a photo of what your table looked like after that stumble?
Yes, yeah, I would.
Let the record reflect we're displaying Exhibit 14 for identification. Mr. Levin, do you recognize this photo?
Yep, I took this one as well, ma'am.
To your knowledge, what time was it taken?
Around 10:18, 10:20, something like that.
And it's a fair and accurate depiction of what your table looked like at that time.
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, the plaintiff moves Exhibit 14 into evidence.
14 is offered. Mr. Castleberry,
No objections, Your Honor.
received.
Now, Mr. Levin, I want to go ahead and look at this photo compared to how your table looked before Jessica fell. Can you tell us what, if at all, is the difference of these two photographs?
Sure. So a couple things. I mean, you see there's another White Claw. She had ordered a couple more. So there was another one on the table there in the second photo, the one on the right. And then if you see that glass with the red and white straw, that was a Captain and Coke that Jessica had ordered that they gave.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation may be heard.
Please.
Your Honor, Mr. Levin just testified that that brown drink in the center was a Captain and Coke that Jessica ordered. But we actually haven't heard the foundation as to how he believes that. Your Honor, it's actually in dispute today what that drink actually was, where Jessica got it, and whether she ordered it from the bar. So, Your Honor, if this witness is going to testify that that drink specifically was a Captain and Coke, we need to hear the foundation as to how he knows that.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor. I believe that Mr. Levin is just testifying to his personal observations of what is in that photograph on the right. It sounds like what Mr. Castleberry is objecting to is an issue of weight, not admissibility, that he can take up on cross-examination if he'd like. But I believe the foundation has been laid as to what Mr. Levin knows about these photographs and the contents of them.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, just looking at that drink, I can't tell what it is. Could be a Coke, could be a Dr. Pepper, could be whiskey, could be anything. Just looking at that drink, you don't know if it's actually a Captain and Coke. And the fact is, that fact is in dispute today. We don't know what that drink is, and that's important to today's trial. So if this witness is going to testify that that definitively was an alcoholic drink that Jessica ordered from this bar, we need to hear that foundation. Otherwise, this is not admissible.
Ms. Branham, explain to me the foundation that allows this witness to testify as to the contents of that container.
Yes, Your Honor. He's already testified that not only was he there that night, but that he was with Jessica as she was ordering drinks from the bar. He's already laid the foundation that he watched her order drinks. He's testified about the White Claws in the photograph. It's, again, Your Honor, it sounds like an issue of weight, not admissibility. If Mr. Castleberry wants to cross this witness on his knowledge of that drink, he's certainly welcome to do that. But I believe we've laid sufficient foundation for the contents of the photograph for him to testify to.
Response,
Mr. Castleberry, why is that insufficient?
Yes, Your Honor. This is still a matter of admissibility because we haven't heard the specific foundation as to how he knows Jessica ordered this drink. If he saw Jessica order this drink, then that could be hearsay. We haven't heard that statement. We haven't heard the foundation of when he saw Jessica order this drink. We actually didn't hear the foundation that he actually saw Jessica order this specific Captain and Coke. And again, Your Honor, it's true. We saw the foundation that she ordered White Claws, that she might have ordered beer, wine, but this Captain and Coke is different, and it's particularly important.
All right, I'm going to sustain the objection. If you can lay more foundation, Ms. Branham, then I'll allow the testimony, but right now I'm sustaining the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
That's better. Mr. Levin, were you able to finish your testimony specifically about the White Claws in the photo here on the right? What's the difference between those and the photo on the left?
Sure. So the White Claws, I was just saying that she had added more. She had gotten more White Claw, and there's another one on the table.
Mr. Levin, I want to shift your attention now again to Jessica's demeanor that night after that stumble. Do you remember taking a video that night?
Yeah, yes, I took a video.
And do you remember when it was taken?
It would have been around 11 p.m. or so. I remember she posted it at 11:11.
At this time, Your Honor, let the record reflect we're displaying Exhibit 10 for witness identification. Mr. Levin, do you recognize this video?
Yeah, based on the screen grab here, this is the video I took. Looks about right.
And it's a fair and accurate depiction of Jessica's demeanor that evening.
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, Your Honor, we seek to introduce Exhibit 10 into evidence.
Ms. Castleberry.
Without objection, Your Honor.
At this time, Your Honor,
And
we
is
would
received.
yes, Your Honor. At this time, I would ask that my second chair play the video.
Sure.
Hi everyone, Morgan and I are in Hollywood. We're at a bar. It's kind of like a Philly bar, except everything is really, really expensive. $10 for a seltzer. And everyone here wants to be a model or an actress. You know, I'd like to thank the Academy. Mom and Dad, you've inspired me. Okay, well, go big or go home.
Mr. Levin, were you and Jessica served any drinks after that video was taken?
Yes, we were served shots, I think green tea shots, right before we left towards the end of the night.
I want to talk about what happened when you and Jessica left that bar that night. Do you remember what time that was?
So around 11:45, 11:50.
And what was Jessica's demeanor at that point?
I mean, I thought she seemed really out of it. She's had slurred speech. She was babbling incoherent. Her eyes were bloodshot.
How, to your knowledge, did Jessica try to get home that night?
I mean, I called for an Uber, and my thought was we would just take it together, right? Because I thought surely she shouldn't drive. But she just wouldn't take it. She didn't want to go.
What did you watch her car do that evening?
I mean, I watched her get in, and I told the Uber driver to follow her, make sure, you know, we could spot if something was wrong, if we needed to help. And maybe 2 minutes out of the parking lot, she crashed.
Would you be able to recognize where that crash occurred on a map?
Yeah.
Mr. Levin, do you recognize this map?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you recognize it?
That's a map of the bar and the path Jessica took when she crashed. I drew the line myself.
Your Honor, I apologize. I believe we have time.
Yes, Your Honor. I would just ask that at this time, Exhibit 21 be entered into evidence with the foundation the witness has laid for this map.
Mr. Castleberry.
No objections.
21 is received.
Yes, Your Honor. And with that, we have no further questions for this witness.
Mr. Castleberry.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Levin.
Good afternoon.
I want to start off by talking about how much Jessica actually had to drink at Sonny's bar. Mr. Harvey, can we get Exhibit 17 on the screen? Sir, this is your receipt from that night, right?
That's right. I paid for it.
Defense moves exhibit 17 into evidence, Your Honor.
Branham.
Yes, Your Honor, I would object to hearsay at this point.
Mr.
Response?
Castleberry.
Yes, Your Honor, this is actually a statement. Yes, Your Honor, this is a self-authenticating business record, Your Honor. That's a Sonny's rooftop bar, Your Honor. This is a receipt produced by an automated declarant. Your Honor, this is a business record.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
Please.
While we agree that with the correct witness, this receipt may fall under the exception of being a business record, this witness certainly isn't the custodian of this document or would have any knowledge as to how it was generated. Mr. Castleberry can't lay the foundation through this witness that this receipt is a business record.
Response?
What do you have to show that it's a business record, Mr. Castleberry?
Yes, Your Honor. Well, first of all, we'll hear that this is actually Mr. Levin's receipt, that Mr. Levin purchased all these drinks and can verify the truthfulness of all the things on this document. He actually bought all of these drinks and he'll be able to testify to that. And secondly, Your Honor, we'll hear later from the defendant, Sonny's Bar, that this is in fact a self-authenticating business record, that this is their receipt, this is Sonny's rooftop bar.
May I respond on those grounds, Your Honor?
Sure.
Again, Your Honor, we agree that this would meet the exception of business records for hearsay if offered through the correct witness. In this case, they will call to the stand, it's our good faith belief, that the defense in this case will call to the stand the actual custodian of this document, which is a requirement for that business record exception to hearsay. Either they need a records custodian to enter this as a business record exception, or they need a certification, which this receipt just doesn't have. So they can't enter it into this witness under that exception at this time, Your Honor. That's all the objection is to, not to the receipt, just to it not fitting that exception at this time.
Okay, so, but you're conceding that it will be admissible when the defense witness is called. Is that what I'm gathering?
When the foundation can be laid on the defense witness that this is a business activity, Your Honor, then yes, because that would be a custodian of this record, someone who knows the regularly kept course of business of it. That's completely admissible under that exception. At least that's our belief, Your Honor. But to admit it now under this witness, Your Honor, it's just not, it doesn't fit that exception at this time.
I gather that, but you don't need to respond, Mr. Castleberry. I gather that, but the issue then would be the defense's inability to recall this witness. So it's a matter of form over substance, I think. I'm gonna allow the witness to testify to the exhibit. I don't want to assume that the defense witness is going to be able to lay the foundation, although I hear both parties say that that'll happen. When it does, then I'm going to ask that this be reoffered. But right now, I will allow the witness to testify to it and take the evidence provisionally.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed.
So, Mr. Levin, this is your receipt from that night, right?
Yes, sir. It is.
That name on the bottom there, it isn't Jessica Marx, is it?
No, sir. We had one tab and I paid for it.
Exactly, sir. The name of that bottom is Morgan Levin. That's you.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Sir, you would actually say that you don't know for sure whether Jessica was the one who finished any of these drinks. Isn't that right?
I can't be sure if she finished her drinks or only drank them partially. That's right. I wasn't really watching.
Sir, you also don't know for sure the actual amount of drinks that Jessica had at the bar that night. Isn't that right as well?
That's right. Like you said, I don't know whether she finished the whole drinks or just part of them. So I don't know, I guess, the quantity that she drank.
So if you're not sure how much she drank at the bar, I want to talk about another way that Jessica might have gotten drunk that night. And I want to keep a timeline for the jury. Mr. Hervey, can we get that up? So Mr. Levin, around 7 p.m. that night, you went over to Jessica's house, right?
Her Airbnb. Yep. She was staying near my dorms.
When you got to her Airbnb, you saw her drinking wine.
That we both kind of drank some wine. She had a glass, maybe two. I had a glass.
Right, sir. When you got to her Airbnb, you saw her drinking a glass of wine. Isn't that right?
Right. We opened it together, about half a bottle, and we both took a glass. That's right.
We also saw some wine bottles just sitting on her table, didn't you?
Not just sitting around. She set up two, as I recall, two empty bottles and took a picture, maybe put it on Instagram, but it's not like there were bottles lying around. No.
Okay, well, let's talk about those empty bottles. Mr. Hervey, can we get exhibit 5 on the screen? Sir, these are the bottles you saw on the table, right? Cut out from that Instagram photo?
That's right. She had said that she thought they would look artsy or something and took a picture of them.
Defense moves exhibit 5 into evidence.
Without objection, Your Honor.
5 is received.
So Mr. Levin, let's talk about these bottles. That bottle on the left, you'd say it's completely empty, wouldn't you?
I would. Yes, sir.
That bottle on the right, you'd say it's about half empty.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Mr. Harvey, can that go on the timeline? So Mr. Levin, you said before that Jessica just took out these bottles, but you don't actually know when Jessica drank the wine in these bottles, do you?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't know if she drank them earlier that week. I don't know.
Well, you said she might have drank them earlier that week. You were actually with Jessica every day the week before you went to Sonny's, weren't you?
We went out every day, but I wasn't with her 24/7. I wasn't with her at her Airbnb, so I don't know. I couldn't tell.
You were, sir, you were with her at least every day that week. Is that right?
At least at some point each day I was with her. That's right. But I couldn't tell you when she drank those.
Mr. Levin, you didn't see her drink from those bottles any day before the day you went to Sonny's. Isn't that right?
Not when we were out. No, sir. She never brought those with us. No.
You don't know if she drank that entire bottle of wine before she picked you up that day, do you?
No, sir. I know she didn't seem like she was drunk or even tipsy or buzzed at all, but I don't know. I don't know.
Mr. Levin, I know you're claiming she didn't seem drunk. I'm just asking you what you know and what you don't know. And you don't know if she drank that entire bottle of wine before she picked you up, yes or no?
Yes, sir. That's what I said. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I'm not sure when she drank it.
All right, so let's talk about how Jessica was acting after you saw that empty wine bottle. Around 9, Jessica drove you to Sonny's bar, right?
Or we sort of. We left at 8:30, got there at 9. Yeah, so that 30-minute stretch.
Now, you testified just a second ago that Jessica didn't seem drunk. But by the time Jessica pulled into the parking lot at that bar, you noticed she had bloodshot eyes.
Yes, I thought she seemed a little tipsy.
Sorry, you noticed she had bloodshot eyes.
Yes.
You smelled alcohol on her breath.
Yes, sir. We had just drank wine.
So that's a yes. You smelled alcohol on her breath.
Yes, sir.
And you noticed she was slurring her words.
She was starting to a little bit. Yes, sir. I thought she seemed tipsy.
So I want to be clear here. Jessica had bloodshot eyes, alcohol in her breath, and was slurring her words before she even set foot into Sonny's bar.
That's right. So like you said, before we even talked to Sonny, before we even went into the bar, she already was, in my opinion, seemed a little tipsy.
Sir, I know you're saying she was a little tipsy. I just want to be very clear here. She had bloodshot eyes, alcohol in her breath, and was slurring her words before she even set foot in that bar. Yes or no?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered at this point.
Response?
Go ahead.
Your Honor, the witness is characterizing these symptoms as just a little tipsy. I want to make it clear for the jury that these symptoms, being just a little tipsy, bloodshot eyes, alcohol in her breath, slurring her words, are more serious than this witness is making it seem. It calls for a follow-up question.
May I respond briefly, Your Honor?
Sure.
The witness has already given a yes and no to the bloodshot eyes question, smelling of alcohol, slurring the words. He's already said yes to all of those things. So he's been very responsive to opposing counsel's questions. He's already gotten an answer to those.
All right, let's move on. Objection is sustained. Let's
Yes,
move
Your
on.
Honor. All right, so sir, looking at this timeline, I want to talk about some of the decisions Jessica made before she died, whether the bar had anything to do with it.
Okay.
Now, you said just now that Jessica was already drinking a few hours before she went. Sir, no one from the bar was there when Jessica was drinking earlier that night, were they?
No, we weren't friends with anybody at that bar. It was just the two of us that had the wine.
So she made that choice all on her own.
I guess I made it with her because I had a glass too, but sure. Yeah, she chose to drink it. That's right.
No one from the bar was there when Jessica chose to drive after she had already started drinking.
No, sir.
That was also Jessica's choice.
That's right.
Sir, you and Jessica started to leave the bar around 11:45, right?
Yes, that's correct.
You actually asked Jessica if she wanted to Uber home.
Yeah, I offered her a seat in my Uber and just said we can just come pick up the car tomorrow.
She said, no, I've gotten pretty good at driving after a big night. Do I have that right?
That's right. She said she was fine.
Then at the end of the night, Jessica got in that car and she drove away.
Yep.
Once again, Mr. Levin, that was Jessica's choice, wasn't it?
Objection, Your Honor. Improper opinion. May I be heard?
Sure.
Part of what the plaintiff's elements to prove here today are that the bar was liable for what happened to Jessica. And it sounds like what defense's contention here is that there's a comparative negligence, that Jessica Marks had something to do with what happened to her on March 24th. So to ask this witness to draw that legal conclusion and put that on the record in front of the jury, whose fault it was, who was making choices that night, that's an improper opinion. He can't draw that legal conclusion that the jury is supposed to be deciding at the end of this trial.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm not asking Mr. Levin to draw a legal conclusion for the jury. I'm just asking about what he saw. Your Honor, as the defense today, we actually have a burden to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Jessica bared more negligence. She was more responsible for her death than the bar was. So, Your Honor, we have a right to present evidence. And Mr. Levin is now testifying to what he believes, whether he believes this was her choice, whether she was the one who did this. He's just testifying to what he saw, Your Honor. We have a burden. We have a right to present it.
Your Honor, may I
The
respond?
choice, let me just ask a question. The choice being that she drove off on her own rather than get in the Uber, is that your
That's exactly
position?
right.
And your objection, Ms. Branham, is to improper lay witness opinion?
Your Honor, it's to improper opinion just to the questions where Mr. Castleberry is asking, it was her choice to do these things. He's asked that multiple times and put in red on his timeline when those choices were made. And that's the decision for the jury to make. He can ask this witness about his observations of her getting into her vehicle. But to go that step further and ask about who was making that choice, that's a decision for the jury to determine at the end of trial.
Response, Your Honor.
No, I've heard enough. Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Levin, when Jessica got in that car and drove away, that was her choice, wasn't it?
Yes, sir. She seemed to think she was fine.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. Your Honor, we have nothing further.
Okay, I don't think there's any time left for redirect. Am I correct about that, Ms. Branham?
Correct, Your Honor. We would just ask that Mr. Levin be allowed to step down.
Okay, thank you for testimony, Mr. Levin. You may step down. And before we call the next witness, actually, do you have another witness, Ms. Branham?
No, Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff rests its case in chief.
Okay, so I'm going to allow the jurors to catch up, myself included. And I'll let you know, Mr. Castleberry, when you can call your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Call your witness, Mr. Castleberry.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Sunny Mehta.
Mr. Mehta, consider yourself sworn. You may proceed.
Good afternoon. Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sunny Mehta.
Can you tell us about Sunny's bar?
Sure. I founded Sunny's Bar about 5 years ago now. It was a rooftop bar with a view of the ocean. We built up a real loyal following. We had a lot of loyal customers, and I was really proud of it.
Sir, how did you come to own a bar?
It really kind of started for me as an interest in chemistry. For a while, I thought I was going to do the whole degree thing. I was going to get into the rare chemicals market. But it turns out that industry is a little bit harder to break into than you would expect. So I settled for more common chemicals. I was able to take out a loan and start a bar, and that's what I did for the last 5 years.
All right, so well, what happened to Sunny's?
After what happened to Jessica, we were all over the news. We went out of business, and it's been a real tough couple of years.
So I need to ask you some questions about that night. And I want to start by talking about how much Jessica actually drank at your bar. Can we get exhibit 17 on the screen? Mr. Mehta, can you tell us what this is?
Sure. This is the receipt from Morgan and Jessica's table that night. It was Morgan who was ordering the drinks.
And can you tell us how these receipts get processed?
Sure. Myself or Frankfurt, the other person who worked there, we just put them into the computer and then they print out, and I keep them in a file cabinet.
Your Honor, defense moves exhibit 17 into evidence.
Without objection, Your Honor.
Okay, this is 17 because somehow I wrote in my notes that it was 21, but I'll just take that it's 17. Okay,
Right, Your Honor. The receipt is exhibit
Admitted.
17.
Got it.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Mehta, can you tell us who bought all these drinks?
I can. It says here on the receipt that it was Morgan.
Sir, how often were you around Jessica and Morgan's table that night?
I'd say pretty often. I go back to talk to them, take their order. I like talking to the customers. It's fun. So I was probably there. I don't know, about 10 times that night.
All right, so in all those interactions, how many of those drinks did you actually see Jessica drink?
To be honest with you, sir, I don't think I saw her drink any of these drinks myself.
Okay, well, if you didn't see Jessica drink them, let's talk about Morgan. How was Morgan, Mr. Levin, acting after he bought all those drinks?
He was messing up his words, like slurring them, his eyes were sort of bloodshot. I was worried about him, to be honest with you.
Mr. Mehta, we heard today that you said something about saying this one's not driving home. Can you tell us what you meant by that?
Sure, I said that to Jessica. I was talking about Morgan. I didn't want Mr. Levin to drive home because he seemed tired.
Okay, so sir, if you didn't see Jessica drinking any of these drinks, I want to take a closer look at where else she might have gotten alcohol that night.
Okay.
Can we get exhibit 14 on the screen? Sir, what are we looking at?
I understand that this is a picture that one of them took of their table that night.
And Your Honor, the plaintiff has already moved this exhibit into evidence. So Mr. Mehta, you see that mug back there?
Yes, I do, with the straw in it.
Did you serve that to Jessica or Mr. Levin?
No, I don't remember serving them that. It's not on the receipt. I don't know what that is.
Okay, well, if you didn't serve it, let me ask you this. Do you know if Jessica could have brought her own alcohol into your bar?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, do you search your customers' bags when they come in?
No, I don't search their bags. No, sir.
Do you do pat downs to your customers to see if they're sneaking in their own alcohol?
No, sir. I certainly don't pat down the people who come into my bar.
Well, sir, do you have any idea where the drink in that jar came from?
No, I just know I didn't take that order.
Now, Mr. Mehta, we've heard a lot today about Jessica's choices the night she died. But I want to make sure the jury understands how that night looked from your perspective. Mr. Harvey, can we get the timeline back up? All right, so sir, when did Jessica come into and leave your bar that night?
She came in right at 9 and left around, I think it was 11:45.
Between 9 and 11:45. Did you see Jessica finish any of the drinks you served?
No, sir, I didn't.
Between 9 and 11:45, did you see Jessica drink any of your alcohol at all?
No, sir, I didn't.
Okay, so after you didn't see her drink anything, what happened at the end of the night?
She got in her car and she left. I honestly, I didn't think it was a big deal.
Mr. Mehta, do you know what happened to Jessica after she left your bar?
I do. She got into a crash. I saw it on the news. It was awful. I was really surprised. I was shocked. Like I said, I didn't really see her drinking very much at the bar.
I want to make sure the jury understands how much you knew about Jessica's actions leading up to her death. Mr. Mehta, did you know that Jessica started drinking hours before she showed up at your bar?
No, I didn't know that. Of course not.
Did you know that Jessica chose to drive to your bar after she had already been drinking?
No, I didn't.
Did you ever hear Jessica say, "I've gotten pretty good at driving after a big night"?
No, sir. I wasn't around when she said it. I never heard that until today.
Mr. Mehta, if you knew any of these things on the night of March 24th, what would you have done?
First of all, I wouldn't have let Jessica order any drinks. I certainly wouldn't have let her leave with her keys. I would have taken them and I would have called a cab for her. But I didn't know about any of this.
Thank you, Mr. Mehta. Your Honor, we have nothing further.
Ms. Branham.
Yes, Your Honor, may I proceed?
You may.
Mr. Mehta, it's your contention today that Jessica Marx didn't look intoxicated enough for you to cut her off the night she died, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's talk about that. Your Honor,
Okay.
let the record reflect that Exhibit 17 is being displayed, an exhibit that's already been entered into evidence. There we go. You recognize this receipt, right, Mr. Mehta?
I do. This is Morgan's receipt from that night.
And you agree with me that you served Morgan Levin and Jessica Marx's table almost $100 of alcohol.
Yes, I did.
You served that table every drink on this receipt, right?
Yes, ma'am. And the chips and guacamole.
So let's talk about how much alcohol you were comfortable putting on that table. First, you served them red wine, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You'd agree with me that it had an alcohol content of 14%.
That sounds right, ma'am. That's standard for a red wine of that vintage.
Next, you served them some White Claws that night.
Yes, and that's a hard seltzer.
And those each had 8% alcohol in them.
Again, that sounds exactly right.
You served them 2 different types of beer that evening.
Yes, ma'am. An IPA and a draft beer.
Those both have roughly 7% alcohol content.
Around that. Yes, ma'am.
And then Mr. Mehta, on top of all of that, you served their table shots too.
Yes, ma'am.
You know that just minutes after Jessica Marx left your bar on March 24th, she crashed her car and she died.
Yes, ma'am. I do know that.
Well, sir, now I want to go ahead and take a look at her autopsy report. Ms. Hinton, can we go ahead and get that exhibit up on the screen? And Your Honor, for purposes of the record, Exhibit 22 has been entered prior to trial. Mr. Mehta, you agree with me that this autopsy report says that Jessica Marx's blood alcohol content at the time of her crash was a 0.16.
Yes, ma'am.
That is 2 times the legal limit, isn't it?
That's correct.
Mr. Mehta, I want to walk through just how many opportunities you had to cut Miss Marx off that night. And I'm going to go ahead and have my second chair keep track for us. You first saw Jessica Marx and her friend walk into your bar at around 9 p.m., right?
That's right. Right around 9.
You then went to their table and you started taking their orders.
That's correct.
You did that about 4 or 5 times that you can remember.
Over the course of the 3 hours that they were there, yes, I did.
You went back to that table 4 or 5 times again to give them what they had ordered, right?
That's right. I was the only one waiting tables that night.
And then you watched Jessica Marx leave your bar at around 11:45.
That's correct, ma'am. Around that time.
Sir, earlier that night, she told you she planned to drive home, right?
Yes, ma'am. And when she left, I thought she was okay. I would have stopped her if I didn't.
You let her walk out of your doors, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am.
So, Ms. Hinton, can you go ahead and tell us, for purposes of the record, just how many times Mr. Mehta alone interacted with Jessica Marx that day?
That's 10 to 12 times at minimum.
Thank you, Ms. Hinton. Thank you, Mr. Mehta. Your Honor, I have nothing further for this witness.
Can you redirect, Mr. Castleberry?
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Mr. Mehta, I just have a few questions. We heard today that you saw Jessica fall down some stairs and stumble onto one of your bartenders, or you? Did you hear that?
I heard Mr. Levin say that. Yeah, yes, I did.
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope of cross-examination.
Response, Your Honor? Your Honor, the plaintiff opened the door to this. She explicitly asked about all the different interactions that Mr. Mehta had with Jessica and had with Morgan Levin. Your Honor, they literally had their co-counsel get up and say the number of times they had an interaction. I'm asking about one of those interactions that we heard about during direct.
Overruled.
Yes, Your
Honor. Mr. Mehta, did you ever see Jessica stumble down some stairs and land onto you?
No, I don't know what he was talking about. That never happened.
Did you ever see Jessica stumble down some stairs and land onto one of your bartenders?
No, not on me or any of the other bartenders that were there that night.
Thank you, Mr. Method. Nothing further.
Any recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Mehta, for your testimony. You may step down. Anything further, Mr. Castleberry?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
You resting?
Yes.
Okay. I'll give the scorers a minute or two. Okay, then, Ms. Branham.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, counsel, members of the jury. At the beginning of this trial, we told you that Jessica Marx's life was cut short because the defendant didn't cut her off. You don't just have to take our word for it. Take theirs. We heard testimony today that when Jessica Marx stumbled down the stairs of Sonny's Bar in Los Angeles, California, she stumbled onto an employee there, the witness that testified for the defense today. His response? Hey, maybe we should cut this one off. What did the bartender do? He turned around and he left. In that moment, that decision, the decision to continue to serve Jessica Marx that evening after that event, that's why we're here. And it's why Jessica Marx isn't. That's why we brought this civil claim of wrongful death into this courtroom against the defendant. And the law says when we did that, we took on a burden to prove to you three things by the greater weight of the evidence. Number one, that on March 24th, 2019, Jessica Marx was under the age of 21. We've already talked about how the defense agrees with us on this element. So really, members of the jury, this trial comes down to these last two. We had to prove that number one, the defendant served Jessica Marx alcohol after she was obviously intoxicated. And number two, that it was the defendant's actions that were a substantial factor in her death. So let's talk about what the evidence has shown for each of these. When we're talking about whether or not she was obviously intoxicated, you heard testimony from patrons of the bar, Morgan Levin in particular. You heard that her speech was slurred, that her eyes were bloodshot, that she couldn't form cohesive sentences, but members of the jury, you don't even just have to take his word for it. Because today we saw a video of exactly what Jessica Marx's physical state was on that day. You watched as she slurred her words, as her sunglasses sat on her face crooked. There's no question she was intoxicated, but members of the jury, how do we know the members and employees of that bar knew? Well, we know because of what happened at 10 p.m. And here's where our timeline becomes really important. Because we heard today that at 10 p.m., Jessica Marx stumbled into one of the employees at Sonny's Bar. And that after that, she was served alcohol anyway. They didn't cut her off, they laughed her off when they saw this happen. How do we know she was served alcohol after that point where they saw her stumble? Well, members of the jury, we saw it in photos. We saw that at 9:42 p.m., there is one less White Claw, one less alcoholic seltzer than there was at 10:20, 20 minutes after employees of that bar saw her stumble. Now, the defense has come in here and they've raised the idea or the claim that maybe Jessica brought her own alcohol into this bar. But members of the jury, when you go into the jury deliberation room, you're going to be asked what's most likely. What most likely happened here based on the evidence you've seen? Is it likely that Jessica Marx came into this bar with her own alcohol and didn't order anything on the receipt we've seen? Or is it likely that she came in with a friend, they shared a tab, and she ordered drinks that, by the way, Morgan Levin didn't like? You heard that he didn't drink those White Claw seltzers. Members of the jury, the only logical, reasonable conclusion is that they were for Jessica Marx. We heard about just how much she was served, not only these White Claws, but shots right before this tab was closed at 11:41 p.m., right before she got into her car and tried to drive away from that bar. If there's any question in your mind that they served her from the hours of 10 p.m. to 11:45 when she left that bar, we know she didn't even make it minutes down the road before her car crashed off the side of the highway. Members of the jury, when we're talking about our third element, The element about who's responsible here, we assign blame to the defendant because members of the jury, how likely is it that somebody who's under the age of 21 is in control of their actions in that car that evening? With a blood alcohol content of 0.16, twice the legal limit, that wasn't Jessica Marx making decisions. That wasn't her deciding to get behind the wheel of a vehicle with every drink the defendant put in her hand. They took away her ability to make those decisions. They put drink after drink, shot after shot on her table. They might as well have put the car keys in her hand too. Now, members of the jury, when you're deciding who to assign blame here to, think about who the adults are in this situation. Jessica Marx wasn't even of legal age to be drinking. The adults in that situation had a duty to protect her, even if she showed up after drinking wine that evening. If she showed up as intoxicated as the defense has alleged here, they still had a duty not to serve her. She shouldn't have been in that bar. She shouldn't have had access to what was behind it. She should still be here with us today. The reason she's not, the reason her life was cut short is because the defendant didn't care enough to cut her off. Find them liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Branham. Mr. Castleberry.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. You can't prevent what you can't predict. What happened on March 24th was a tragedy. There's no other way to say it. Jessica Marx should have had the chance to grow old, to graduate college, to accomplish her dreams. When something like this happens, it's understandable to look for answers. But in your search for answers, you have to make sure you're looking for an answer that's correct, not just convenient. Because sure, it's convenient to blame this tragedy on the evil business, the bar that sold alcohol to someone it shouldn't have. But the law doesn't let us blame someone who couldn't have prevented or even predicted the tragedy in the first place. No, in trials like this one, it's your responsibility to look past what's convenient and find what is right. And in this case, the right answer is this. Jessica's death was a tragedy, but it wasn't the bar's fault. See, it was the plaintiff's burden to prove that Jessica died because of the alcohol Sonny's bar sold her. That means it's not enough for them to show you that Jessica was underage or that she ended up driving drunk that night. No, they had to prove that Jessica died because of the alcohol she got at the bar and not because she got drunk earlier that night. And they just weren't able to meet that burden today. In fact, they showed you a chart with their burden. Let's take a quick look at that. First, we agree that she was a minor. That's no problem. But second, that Jessica was obviously intoxicated to the bar. You heard no evidence of that at all. You saw one video that the defendant didn't even watch. Third, the defendant caused her death. Members of the jury, there's no evidence of that either. You saw today that even though this is tragic, Jessica made her own choices. She caused her own death. So if they can't meet their burden, what happened? Well, let's go through each of those three questions that I asked you to remember at the beginning of this trial. First, how much did Jessica actually drink at Sonny's? See, when Ms. Branham got up at the beginning of this trial and promised to you that she would prove that Sonny's bar caused Jessica's death by serving her too much alcohol, I wonder what kind of evidence you thought you'd see. Some pictures or videos of Jessica taking shots? An accounting of what she actually drank at the bar? Testimony from anyone who saw her finish her drinks? Members of the jury, you didn't get any of that. No, instead, they showed you this receipt. But remember, this isn't a list of what Jessica drank. This is a list of what Mr. Levin bought. Today, you didn't hear any concrete evidence about how much of these Jessica actually drank. No one told you that they saw her finish a single drink at Sonny's that night. Now look, we're not saying that Jessica Marx drank nothing at Sonny's. We're saying we don't know. And when the plaintiff has the burden to prove that Sonny's killed Jessica by giving her too much alcohol, not knowing whether she drank Sonny's alcohol in the first place is not good enough. But of course, we did all see that video. Again, no one disputes that Jessica was drunk that night. But that brings us to the second question. How did Jessica Marx really get drunk? See, we know one thing. Wherever Jessica started drinking that day, it wasn't at Sonny's. Because the plaintiff's own witness told you that Jessica was drunk before she set foot in that bar. Again, the plaintiff tried to tell you that she was only tipsy, that Jessica only drank one glass of wine before she got to the bar, but we don't actually know that. Remember, Jessica was slurring her words, had bloodshot eyes, and smelled like alcohol. Does that sound like tipsy to you? And all of that was in the car on the way to Sonny's. Today, we showed you how that might have happened. Earlier that night, there was an empty bottle of wine just sitting on the table at Jessica's apartment. An empty bottle of wine that Morgan hadn't seen Jessica drinking any other day that week. See, members of the jury, when you look at all the defendants' actions that night, the story of March 24th starts to make sense. It's not the story of some evil bar that force-fed alcohol to a helpless kid. It's the story of a person who got drunk all on her own, refused to get into an Uber because she's gotten pretty good at driving after a big night, and then independently chose to drive drunk. Sonny's bar, well, that was just a pit stop. That brings us to the last question. How much did Sonny's actually know about this? See, members of the jury, today we brought a claim called contributory negligence. And that means even if you believe Sonny's illegally served alcohol to an intoxicated minor, you still get to decide how responsible Sonny's really was. Now, it's easy to get caught up in the plaintiff's accusations, to assume that the bar should have done something to prevent this. So I want to take a moment to show you what that night looked like from Sonny's perspective. This is all the bar saw that night. A woman walked in, didn't finish any of the drinks her friend ordered, wasn't seen drinking much at all, and then a little bit later, she left. Based on this, no one could have predicted that tragedy was about to strike. No one could have predicted that Jessica's life was on the line. No one could have predicted what happened next. The plaintiff keeps telling you that Sonny's should have cut her off, that he cut her life short. But you know Sonny's couldn't have done that. So you can't prevent what you can't predict. You see, members of the jury, when Sonny Mehta showed up to this trial, his business didn't become liable because they sold alcohol to someone with a fake ID. They didn't become liable because Jessica was drunk. They didn't become liable because the plaintiff says they are. And when the plaintiff brings a razor-thin case that rests on drinks no one saw Jessica finish and someone else's bar tab, well, they never become liable at all. That's because they never were. Find Sonny's bar not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castleberry. Ms. Branham.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed? Members of the jury, I cannot believe that today in this courtroom, in front of 19-year-old Jessica Marx's family, I'm having to stand here and defend that girl's actions on the day that she died. I'm having to stand here and compare a 19-year-old girl's decisions on March 24th to the adults that stood behind the bar serving her that day. But that's what the defense has asked us to do, so let's talk about it. First, I want to talk about the receipt that you've seen throughout the course of this trial, because when you go into the jury deliberation room, the judge is going to tell you that you've got to determine what most likely happened here based on the evidence we've seen. When you look at that receipt, ask yourselves, is it reasonable? Is it likely that Morgan Levin drank all of these drinks by himself, even though we heard testimony that he didn't like some of them on there? Even though we saw a video with Jessica Marx holding seltzer from that bar in her hand? Is it likely that she didn't drink this at all? I mean, you heard just how comfortable the defense's own witness was putting alcohol on that girl's table, glass after glass, shot after shot. He continued to serve her, and that's the issue here. is that after she stumbled into him, he continued to serve her anyway. That's why we're here and why Jessica Marx isn't. Even if she walked into that bar after drinking an entire bottle of wine, which we don't know that that's the truth, but even if that's true, that bar still had a duty. The adults behind that bar still had a duty to that underage girl not to serve her. That's how we've met our burden. At this time, I ask that you do the only thing that justice and the law demand here. Find the defendant liable. Make sure that bars and restaurants know you can't just do this to kids. Find them liable for how they failed Jessica Marx. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Branham. The case is submitted. I'll ask the participants to come back on screen, but also for the jurors to make sure that they submit their score